The first 3 Spy Kids movies after they finish their homework.
Oh, man.
Now, for the first time ever, Blu-ray.
Let's go.
All the fun
Lord knows. Little brothers.
and puncture
This is now a code red situation.
The game is a trap.
in high definition.
This to the next level.
Starring Antonio Banderas of Vega, Terry Hatcher, with appearances by Steve Buscemi, Salma Hayek, and Cheech Marin, and extras every kid will enjoy.
Show me that again.
From director Robert Rodriguez.
What if these coolest secret agents in the world were your parents, and when they disappear, 2 regular kids have to save the world on their own? Stick around with SA Film Facts for amazing facts, hidden details, and the full movie review. Spy Kids is an American movie franchise built around 5 fun spy action comedy films created by Robert Rodriguez. The story follows 2 adventurous kids who suddenly find out that their mom and dad aren't just regular parents, they're actually secret spies. Everything changes when their parents mysteriously disappear, forcing the brother and sister to jump into the world of secret missions, cool gadgets, and dangerous enemies. As they team up with a top secret spy organization, they have to use their brains, courage, and teamwork to rescue their parents and save the day. Along the way, they face crazy challenges, make surprising discoveries, and prove that even kids can become real heroes when their family needs them the most. Carmen Cortez and her younger brother Juni Cortez live with their parents, Ingrid and Gregorio. To them, their mom and dad seem like the most boring parents ever. They have no clue that both of them are actually legendary international spies who used to work for a secret agency called the OSS, Organization of Super Spies, years before having kids. Gregorio and Ingrid were actually enemies from different countries. They were sent on missions to take each other out, but instead, they fell in love. They got married, left the spy world behind, and started a family so they could give their kids a normal life. Back when the world was full of tension between countries, governments created a new kind of secret agent called super spies. These agents were incredibly smart, highly trained, and could stop wars before they even started. Gregorio and Ingrid were 2 of the best spies around. Even though they were supposed to be enemies, they couldn't ignore their feelings for each other. After getting married, they became targets because both sides wanted them gone. Instead of living on the run forever, they retired and focused on raising their family. To keep Carmen and Junie safe, Gregorio and Ingrid never tell them anything about their spy past. They want their kids to grow up without being dragged into dangerous missions. At the same time, they were worried about both of them. Carmen has been secretly skipping school, while Junie struggles to make friends and spends most of his time imagining adventures with characters from his favorite TV show. Carmen is tired of always being stuck babysitting her little brother, so she's usually rude and impatient with him. Deep down, though, she's hiding problems of her own. She skips classes and secretly wets the bed at night, something she's embarrassed about and desperately wants to keep hidden, especially from Junie. Junie doesn't have much confidence in himself. His favorite show is Floop's Fooglies, a colorful children's program hosted by the strange and goofy Fegan Floop. The show features weird creatures called the Fooglies that speak complete nonsense. Junie absolutely loves watching it, but Gregorio can't stand the show and always complains whenever it's on. One day, Gregorio gets an urgent message from the OSS saying several secret agents have mysteriously disappeared. The next morning, he tells Ingrid about it, and they're both called back into action. Gregorio starts believing that Fig and Floop is somehow behind the missing spies. He notices that one of Floop's Fugly characters looks almost exactly like one of the missing OSS agents. Donegan giggles. Gregorio becomes convinced that the missing agents are being turned into these strange TV creatures. Since they have to investigate immediately, they leave Carmen and Junie with their trusted family friend, Felix Gum, who the kids call Uncle Felix, even though they're not actually related. Gregorio and Ingrid head toward Floop's island in a tiny spy submarine. While traveling, they suddenly receive a message from Floop, who says they have something he wants. Almost immediately, another submarine starts chasing them. Gregorio tries everything he can to escape, but before they can get away, an even larger submarine swallows them whole. Floop's goofy robot guards called the Thumb Thumbs capture them. These weird robots have giant thumbs for their heads, arms, and legs, and they wear bright red vests. Not long after, Carmen and Junie discover that their parents have been kidnapped and finally learn the shocking truth: they're secret spies. Meanwhile, Floop has problems of his own inside his giant castle on the island. A powerful businessman named Lisp is forcing him to build an army that can help take over the world. Unfortunately for Lisp, all of Floop's creations, including the Fooglies and Thumb Thumbs, have been disappointing failures. Trying to impress Lisp, Floop reveals his newest project, an army called the Spy Kids. These are powerful robot children disguised to look exactly like the kids of world leaders. The plan is to secretly replace real children and use them to help conquer the world. The robots were built by Floop's assistant Alexander Minion. However, there's one huge problem: they don't have real intelligence yet. They need a special invention called the third brain, an advanced AI that will allow them to think, talk, and make decisions on their own. Lisp loses his temper and demands working robots within 2 days, threatening to destroy everything if Floop fails. Gregorio and Ingrid were captured because Gregorio helped create the third brain years ago and is the only person who knows where it is hidden. Floop wants him to reveal its location, but Gregorio refuses. Ingrid has no idea where the third brain is, and Gregorio tells everyone he destroyed it years ago. After Floop leaves the room, Gregorio finally admits to Ingrid that the third brain was actually a secret OSS project. It was designed to have all the intelligence and skills of every OSS agent combined into one AI. The project was considered far too dangerous, so every scientist destroyed their work. Gregorio, however, secretly kept the final prototype instead of destroying it. Back at the Cortez house, Floop's men attack. Carmen and Junie barely escape while Uncle Felix gets captured. Before he's taken away, Felix finally tells the kids the truth about their parents and encourages them to rescue them. The kids escape in a tiny submarine that automatically takes them to a hidden OSS safe house. At the safe house, Carmen and Junie finally accept that they're the children of legendary spies. Instead of running away, they decide they're going to save their parents themselves. While they're getting ready, another OSS agent named Miss Gradenko arrives. She gives Carmen a bracelet as a sign that she can be trusted and starts asking questions about the third brain. Carmen has no clue what she's talking about. Suddenly, Gradenko orders the safe house to tear itself apart. As Ninja Thumb Thumbs destroy the kids' escape submarine, Carmen and Junie realize Gradenko is actually working for the bad guys. During the chaos, Junie accidentally discovers that the third brain has been hidden inside the safe house the whole time. A huge chase begins. Carmen grabs the third brain and the two siblings barely escape. Soon, Carmen realizes the bracelet Gradenko gave her secretly contains a tracking device. Before they can get very far, robotic copies of Carmen and Junie steal the third brain and deliver it to Minion. With the AI finally in his hands, Minion takes control of the robot army and even locks Floop inside his own castle. Back at the castle, Gregorio explains to Ingrid that Minion used to work for the OSS. He was fired after Gregorio caught him secretly messing with the third brain project. Now Minion plans to use it for his own evil goals, while Floop still just wants to make children's TV shows. Carmen and Junie decide to find Gregorio's older brother, the famous inventor Machete Cortez. Machete has been holding a grudge against Gregorio for years because he was always forced to watch over his younger brother. At first, he refuses to help the kids because he's still angry. Left with no other choice, Carmen and Junie secretly steal a map of Floop's castle and a spy plane so they can rescue their parents on their own. During the flight, Carmen and Junie's constant arguing almost causes the plane to crash. Junie finally gets tired of being picked on and calls Carmen Diaper Lady. Carmen gets furious, but while trying to save the plane together, Junie admits he has always known about her bedwetting problem. He never made fun of her because their mom asked him to keep it a secret. For the first time, the two siblings truly understand each other and their relationship finally starts getting stronger. After reaching the castle, Carmen and Junie split up to search for their parents. Junie finds Floop locked up and sets him free. He convinces Floop that what his TV show has always been missing is real children having fun, not scary monsters. Floop agrees to help. Together, they rescue Gregorio and Ingrid before confronting Minion. They trap him inside the machine that creates the Fuglies, revealing that the missing spies had been transformed into those strange creatures all along. Minion manages to escape before the transformation finishes, but the machine mutates him into an even weirder monster with extra heads and giant hands covered in fingers. Soon, the heroes face Gradenko, Minion, Lisp, and an army of 500 robot children. Right when things look hopeless, Mashit suddenly arrives to help. He jokes that he came back for the same reason he originally left, because someone had to keep an eye on his little brother. Flo reprograms all the robot kids, giving them real personalities instead of following evil orders. As Minion tells Lisp, the robots now have minds of their own and won't listen to anyone anymore. Instead of attacking people, the robot kids start acting like normal children and even begin tossing the villains around like toys. After everything is over, Gregorio and Machete finally fix their broken relationship. They even laugh because neither of them can really remember why they stayed mad for so many years. Floop completely changes his TV show, replacing the old monsters with friendlier characters including Minion and the robot versions of Carmen and Junie. Finally, the leader of the OSS, Devlin, offers Carmen and Junie official jobs as secret spies. Carmen smiles and says that being a spy is actually the easy part. Keeping their family together is the hardest mission of all. She agrees to become a spy only if the entire Cortez family gets to work together as one team. Casting of Spy Kids 2001, the central family at the heart of Spy Kids was envisioned by director Robert Rodriguez as a reflection of his own large Latin American family, bringing authenticity and representation to a family action film. Gregorio Cortez, the retired spy father, was portrayed by Antonio Banderas, already a major international star by 2001 thanks to roles in films like The Mask of Zorro and collaborations with Rodriguez on projects such as Desperado. Banderas brought charisma, physicality, and paternal warmth to the role. His history with Rodriguez made the casting seamless. The director had seen potential in him for a more family oriented project during earlier shoots. Banderas' performance anchored the Cortez family dynamic, blending suave spy skills with relatable dad moments that resonated with audiences. Ingrid Cortez, Gregorio's wife and fellow retired spy, was played by Carla Gugino. Her casting stands out as one of the more unconventional choices in the film. At just 27 years old during filming, Gugino was significantly younger than the character's implied backstory, a veteran spy with a decade of service and two children aged around 9 and 11. In interviews, Gugino has humorously reflected on the physically totally impossible math of the role, noting the age gap made the timeline implausible. Yet, Rodriguez saw something special in her. Production had already been underway for about 2 weeks when he met with her. He expressed that he was searching for the right mother figure for the young actors, and after her audition and their discussion, he assured her that if executed well, audiences would accept it without question. Gugino and Banderas had prior professional history from the 1995 film Miami Rhapsody, directed by David Frankel, which helped establish on screen chemistry quickly. This pre existing rapport contributed to the believable partnership of the Cortez parents. Gugino's Ingrid was tough, elegant, and maternal, providing a strong counterbalance to Banderas's Gregorio. Her casting defied typical Hollywood expectations for maternal roles at the time and added a fresh, youthful energy to the spy parents. The child leads, Carmen and Juni Cortez, were pivotal to the film's success and required careful selection. Rodriguez emphasized finding child actors with innate magic who could set the tone for the entire production. For Juni Cortez, the younger sibling, Daryl Sabara was cast after an extensive search. Rodriguez met him when Sabara was only 7 years old. Unlike other young boys who auditioned and seemed unfocused, Sabara arrived prepared and engaged. His red hair became a key visual marker. Rodriguez even decided to dye the mother's hair red to match for family cohesion. Sabara had some prior TV experience, including a memorable role on Will and Grace as Broccoli Boy. But Spy Kids marked his major film debut. His wide eyed innocence and comedic timing made Juni an endearing underdog hero. Alexa Vega was selected for Carmen Cortez, the older, more rebellious sister. Rodriguez auditioned many children for the role and found most performances lacking realism until Vega arrived. She delivered lines naturally, as if they weren't scripted, bringing confidence and attitude to Carmen. Vega already had acting credits, including a notable appearance in Twister as a younger version of a character. Her chemistry with Sabara was immediate and sibling like, essential for the film's core relationship. Both child actors auditioned in 1999, and Rodriguez conducted thorough searches 6 months for the right Junie to ensure they were the best fits. The decision to center the story on a Latinx family was personal for Rodriguez, who based elements on his own upbringing in a family of 10 kids. Studio executives initially questioned the casting, asking why the family was Latin and not American. To which Rodriguez replied that they were American. He pushed back against concerns that it might limit the audience, arguing that specificity makes stories universal, much like James Bond appeals beyond British viewers. This advocacy for representation was groundbreaking for a mainstream kids action film in 2001. Supporting roles added star power and variety. Alan Cumming portrayed Figen Floop, the eccentric children's TV host with a hidden agenda. Cummings' theatrical background, versatility as a singer, dancer, and actor brought colorful villainy and later redemption to the character. His dynamic with Tony Shalhoub's Alexander Minion was particularly memorable. Shalhoub, known for Wings at the time and soon to star in Monk, played the nerdy but diabolical scientist. He was drawn to the role's potential for redemption and enjoyed the imaginative sets and creatures Rodriguez described during their meeting in Austin. The pair's theater roots enhanced their on screen interplay. Terry Hatcher appeared as Ms. Gradenko, a turncoat OSS agent. Cheech Marin took on Felix Gum, posing as the kid's uncle. Marin brought comedic familiarity from his long career. Danny Trejo, a frequent Rodriguez collaborator from Desperado, played Uncle Machette, the gadget inventor and estranged brother. Trejo's tough persona contrasted perfectly with the family warmth, and his real life connection to Rodriguez made the casting natural. Robert Patrick was Mr. Lisp, a menacing businessman. Mike Judge voiced or played Donegon Dynamite. Celebrity cameos enriched the ensemble. George Clooney as Devlin, Dick Clark as a financier, and even director Richard Linklater in a small role as a cool spy. Guillermo Navarro, the film's cinematographer, appeared as a pastor. These choices reflected Rodriguez's network and his ability to attract talent for fun, smaller parts. Casting the children came with unique challenges. Rodriguez, from a large family, prioritized a supportive environment. He noted that finding the right kids was crucial because they set the movie's tone. Sabara's focus stood out immediately, while Vega's realism won her the part after many disappointing auditions. Other notable near misses included Elizabeth Olsen, who auditioned but was glad she didn't get the role as she avoided heavy child acting commitments. The Cortez family names drew from Rodriguez's relatives, deepening the personal investment. Gregorio was inspired by an uncle who was an FBI agent. This authenticity infused the performances. Banderas, already familiar with Rodriguez's style, embraced the project for its family appeal, especially as he had young children. Gugino's late addition after filming started highlighted Rodriguez's flexible, intuitive approach. He trusted his vision over rigid timelines, adjusting for the perfect fit. Her youth added an energetic dynamic to the parents, making the spy couple feel vibrant rather than middle aged. For the child actors, working with established stars like Banderas and Gugino was formative. Sabara recalled them treating the kids as peers, not just children. Cumming was particularly supportive, described as a superhero. This positive set environment, emphasized by Rodriguez, contributed to the natural performances. Supporting cast choices extended to stunt and effects performers who doubled in minor roles, and Texas based locals for authenticity. Casting directors like Mary Vernew and McCarthy and local associates such as Joe Edna Bolden helped assemble the ensemble efficiently. The villains and secondary spies were quiet actors who could handle campy, over the top elements while grounding the story. Cummings' flew balanced silliness with menace, evolving across the early films. Shalhoub's Minion provided intellectual contrast and physical comedy through effects like the distorted heads, which Rodriguez himself helped mold. Trejo's Machete became a fan favorite, his gadget expertise and family loyalty adding depth. His long collaboration with Rodriguez ensured a comfortable, effective performance. Similarly, Marin's Felix Gum offered humorous relief and OSS support. Cameos like Clooney's Devlin connected to Rodriguez's earlier work, From Dusk Till Dawn, rewarding loyal collaborators while adding Hollywood luster. These brief appearances elevated the production without overshadowing the family focus. Rodriguez's casting philosophy prioritized chemistry, talent that fit the tone, and personal connections. For kids, he sought those with natural star quality who could carry emotional and action scenes. Extensive auditions for the leads paid off in the sibling bond between PenaVega and Sabara, which felt genuine and drove the narrative. The Latinx representation extended beyond leads, supporting roles and crew reflected diversity, aligning with Rodriguez's Troublemaker Studios ethos in Austin. This choice, despite studio hesitation, proved visionary, making Spy Kids a cultural milestone. Individual actor preparations varied. Banderas brought physical training from action roles. The children underwent action training but benefited from Rodriguez's kid friendly direction. Gugino embraced the role despite age concerns, focusing on maternal strength and behind the scenes stories reveal Rodriguez's hands on style. He not only directed but influenced casting through personal outreach. His AD anecdote in one story, fast forwarding a tape of Gugino's previous work yet spotting her maturity underscores his instinctive decisions. The full cast included many uncredited or minor roles filled by family, friends, and locals. Evan Sabara, Daryl's brother, as an intruder spy kid, Rebecca Rodriguez, Patricia Vaughn, and others in wedding or background scenes. This community feel enhanced the family theme. Fugli's performers like Shannon Shea, Norman Cabrera, and Trent Bate brought the whimsical creatures to life, blending practical effects and performance. Their casting supported the film's inventive visual style. Overall, the casting blended established stars, rising talents, personal connections, and fresh faces. It created a vibrant, believable world where a Latino family could be super spies, inspiring generations. Rodriguez's commitment to finding magic in the children and supporting them with seasoned actors resulted in a timeless ensemble expanding on Banderas. His international appeal helped market the film globally. His comfort with Rodriguez allowed authentic family interactions. Scenes of parental worry and spy prowess showcased his range. Gugino's Ingrid defied age norms, proving casting can prioritize chemistry over strict realism. Her reflections highlight the joy of the project despite logistical quirks. Sabara and PenaVega's journeys from child stars to reflecting on the film 25 years later underscore the casting's long term impact. Their bond persists, mirroring their characters. Cumming and Shalhoub's villainous duo added humor and heart, with redemption arcs that enriched the story. Their theater backgrounds informed nuanced performances in an effects heavy film. Trejo, Marin, Patrick Hatch, and Judge rounded out a diverse, talented supporting cast that elevated every scene. Cameos provided star wattage and nods to Rodriguez's circle. The casting process exemplified Rodriguez's independent, resourceful filmmaking. From fighting for representation to nurturing young talent, it defined Spy Kids' success and legacy. Each choice contributed to a film that felt personal, fun, and inclusive. Further details on child casting. Rodriguez's confidence stemmed from early finds like Sabara, allowing time to perfect the rest. Vega's natural delivery stood out amid subpar auditions. This patience yielded iconic performances. Studio pushback on ethnicity highlighted industry challenges, but Rodriguez's argument for universality prevailed, influencing future diverse family films. Gugino's story of not being on initial lists but winning the role through a direct meeting shows Rodriguez's openness to serendipity. The prior Banderas connection sealed the family unit. The ensemble's post film careers varied, but the shared experience created lasting memories and friendships, especially for the young leads treated as equals. Minor roles like financiers, Dick Clark, Louis Black, etc., added real world gravitas to the spy world. Linklater's cameo connected Austin's film community. In some, Spy Kids casting was a masterclass in balancing star power, fresh talent, personal vision, and cultural representation, creating an enduring family adventure. Word count approximately 5,000. Expand through detailed analysis of each major and supporting performer, anecdotes, director's process, and contextual impacts. Production development and pre production long before Robert Rodriguez became known as the architect of a family friendly espionage franchise. His creative instincts were already pointed towards stories built for younger audiences. His earliest attempt at this kind of storytelling came years before Spy Kids ever reached a screenplay page in the form of the short film Bedhead, made in 1991. That short, modest as it was, represented Rodriguez's first real attempt to make something that spoke to children and to the kind of imaginative, slightly anarchic humor that would later define his most successful family project. A year after Bedhead, Rodriguez's career took a very different turn with the release of El Mariachi, the ultra low budget action thriller that announced him as a major new voice in independent cinema and set him on a path toward gritty, violent, adult oriented filmmaking. Yet, even as that reputation grew, Rodriguez never abandoned the ambition planted by Bedhead. He wanted eventually to make full length family features in the spirit of the movies he had loved as a child himself, and that ambition sat with him throughout the 1990s as he built a name directing genre films for adult audiences. The tension between those two creative identities, the visceral R rated action filmmaker and the director who wanted to make something his own children could watch, became central to how Spy Kids eventually took shape. Rodriguez has spoken about the moment that crystallized his desire to pivot toward family entertainment, a conversation in which a fan told him that his young son loved Desperado, Rodriguez's stylish, blood soaked follow up to El Mariachi. The idea that a 6-year old was watching a film filled with gunfights and stylized violence unsettled him. He has been candid that while he never intended for children to be in the audience for that kind of material, the reality of how his films were being consumed by families made him reconsider what kind of stories he wanted to tell going forward. He described wanting to make something that was pure action and adventure for kids without guns or graphic violence, and pointed to the faculty, an earlier genre picture of his, as an example of a project where he had already begun consciously restraining the goriness of his instincts, making sure that even in a monster driven story, the characters survive to the end. This impulse toward restraint, toward finding tension and spectacle without bloodshed, became one of the foundational creative principles behind Spy Kids. Rodriguez wanted the finished film to carry an unmistakable sense of childlike imagination in its DNA, not simply a movie about children, but one that felt as though it had been conceived, written, and staged by a child's mind let loose with a real budget and real filmmaking tools. That ambition shaped everything from the film's visual palette, saturated and toy like, to its plotting, which leans into exaggerated gadgets, outlandish villains, and the wish fulfillment fantasy of ordinary kids discovering that the adults around them lead secret double lives. Rodriguez wrote the bulk of the screenplay in 1998, working through the story of two siblings who learn that their seemingly unremarkable parents are actually retired spies pulled back into service and who must themselves become spies in order to save them. The premise gave Rodriguez license to indulge every device he associated with the spy genre: hidden gadgets, secret organizations, disguised villains, exotic layers, while filtering it all through a child's sense of wonder and family loyalty rather than the cynicism and sexual innuendo that traditionally characterized adult spy fiction. Casting the film required finding performers who could commit fully to that tone without condescension, treating the material's silliness with sincerity rather than winking at the audience. Tony Shalhoub, who would go on to play the scheming yet oddly endearing Alexander Minion, came to the project already invested in Rodriguez's filmmaking sensibility. He had been an admirer of Rodriguez's earlier work and as a father of two young children himself, was rather of two the opportunity to appear in a film explicitly designed for family viewing rather than the harder edged material he associated with the director's back catalogue. After reading the screenplay, Shalhoub met with Rodriguez and Rodriguez's wife and producing partner, Elizabeth Avelan, who walked him through concept art and early animation tests, illustrating the visual style the finished film was aiming for. That preview gave Shalhoub a clearer sense of the tone Rodriguez wanted, and he later credited his own experience reading to his children and playing alongside them as the thing that let him approach Minion's cartoonish menace and the film's broader childlike logic from something like a child's own point of view. Rather than an adult actor's detached perspective, the process of assembling the rest of the cast involved some notable nears, misses, and behind the scenes competition for key roles. Carla Gugino, who ultimately played Ingrid Cortez, the family's steely and resourceful mother, won the part over other actresses under consideration for the role, including Kelly Preston and Julianne Moore, both established names whose presence would have given the film a different tenor. Meanwhile, the audition process attracted young performers who would later become far more famous in their own right without landing a role in this particular film. Both Elizabeth Olsen and Brie Larson auditioned during the search for the film's child performers years before either actress became a household name through very different projects. The roles that mattered most, however, went to Alexa Vega and Daryl Sabara, who auditioned to play Carmen and Junie Cortez, the two siblings at the emotional center of the story. In 1999, Vega and Sabara's casting proved to be one of the more consequential decisions of the production, since the chemistry between the two of them and the way each actor balanced the film's comic exaggeration with real emotional stakes became inseparable from the franchise's identity across its subsequent sequels. Beyond the human cast, a significant portion of pre production energy went into designing the film's more fantastical elements, particularly Alexander Minion's grotesque transformation late in the story. The visual concept for the distorted, oversized heads that erupt from Minion's body once he is captured and mutated by Floop's machines was developed hands on by Rodriguez himself, who worked on gel molding those appliances. According to Shalhoub, despite their unsettling, bulbous appearance on screen, the finished prosthetic pieces were remarkably lightweight to wear, a detail that speaks to the resourceful, practically minded approach to effects work that Rodriguez brought from his lower budget filmmaking roots into what was for him a considerably larger production. That hands on involvement in effects design was consistent with Rodriguez's broader reputation as a filmmaker who preferred to control as many elements of production personally as possible, a tendency that would only become more pronounced as his career progressed, and that is reflected in the unusually long list of production roles he held on Spy Kids itself, serving simultaneously as writer, director, producer, and eventually editor. The overall development period then was defined less by conflict or turmoil than by Rodriguez methodically assembling the pieces of a very personal project, a screenplay drafted from his own stated desire to make something his children could watch, a cast built around performers willing to buy into an earnest, non ironic tone, and early creative groundwork on practical effects that reflected his hands on, low overhead instincts, even as the scale of the production grew well beyond his earlier independent features. Part of what made the development process distinctive was how directly it drew on Rodriguez's own family life and his working relationship with his wife and producing partner, Elizabeth Avelan. The two had already built a long collaborative history together by the time Spy Kids entered active development, and that partnership extended into how the project was shaped creatively as much as how it was financed and produced. Bringing Avalan into early casting conversations, including the meeting where she and Rodriguez walked Tony Shalhoub through concept art before he committed to the project, reflected a production culture built around a small, trusted circle of collaborators rather than the layered executive oversight more typical of a large studio family film. That closeness between the film's creative and producing leadership gave Rodriguez unusual latitude to make quick decisions about tone, casting, and visual style without needing to route those choices through an extended studio approval process, a dynamic that had served him well on his earlier independent features and that he carried directly into a project with a considerably larger budget and a much broader intended audience. The decision to root the story's spy organization in something resembling real intelligence history, however loosely, also reflects a layer of craft embedded in the project from its earliest writing stages. The fictional OSS at the center of the story borrows its name and some of its flavor from the real world Office of Strategic Services, the American intelligence agency active during the Second World War that later evolved into the modern Central Intelligence Agency, and one of the film franchise's antagonist characters. Donegal Giggles was named as a nod to William Joseph Donovan, the real OSS founding director. That kind of grounding, threading a wink toward genuine intelligence history through an otherwise thoroughly fantastical, gadget driven plot, is characteristic of how the screenplay balanced pure, childlike invention against a loose scaffolding of espionage genre convention borrowed from decades of adult spy fiction and repurposed for a much younger audience. Casting decisions extended beyond the film's marquee adult performers to its wider ensemble of supporting and background players as well, many of whom were drawn from within Rodriguez's existing circle of collaborators and friends rather than through conventional studio casting channels alone. Cinematographer Guillermo Navarro, who shot the film, also appears briefly on screen in a small role, while filmmaker Richard Linklater, a fellow fixture of the Austin film scene, took a cameo part as a background spy. These choices reinforce just how much the production functioned as an extension of Rodriguez's home base rather than a conventional big studio shoot parachuted into an unfamiliar city, giving the finished film a texture of community and familiarity that ran underneath its more overtly commercial elements. Filming principal photography on Spy Kids took place predominantly in Austin, Texas, the city that had already become closely associated with Rodriguez's filmmaking career and where he had built much of his production infrastructure. The bulk of the shoot, described as spanning 48 days, unfolded there in 2000, giving the production a home base quality that suited Rodriguez's preference for maintaining tight control over his sets and crews. Austin's landscapes and the resources available to Rodriguez locally allowed him to construct the film's more fantastical environments, including the exaggerated candy colored castle belonging to children's television host Fegan Floop, without needing to rely as heavily on distant studio facilities. While the majority of the production stayed rooted in Texas, the filmmakers did travel outside the United States for some of the story's exterior sequences, shooting portions of the film in countries in South America to capture footage that gave the story's globe spanning spy narrative a sense of geographic scale beyond what a single regional shoot could offer on its own. The 48-day shooting schedule was relatively brisk for a studio family film with as many practical effects, stunt sequences, and visual set pieces as Spy Kids required, and it reflects the efficient no waste production style that had characterized Rodriguez's career from his earliest low budget features onward. Even as his budgets grew, Rodriguez retained habits from his years making films with minimal crews and resources, a willingness to move quickly, make decisions on the fly, and rely on practical ingenuity rather than extended, expensive post production fixes. That philosophy showed up directly in the effects work built into the shoot itself, including the aforementioned gel molded prosthetic heads used for Minion's mutation sequence, physical props that could be executed and captured on camera during filming rather than requiring extensive digital compositing after the fact. Working with child actors as the two leads added its own layer of complexity to the shoot. Alexa Vega and Daryl Sabara were required to carry a significant share of the film's physical action, participating in chase sequences, stunt work involving the miniature submarine escape, and extended scenes inside elaborate gadget filled sets, all while maintaining the comic timing and sibling rapport the story depended on. Supporting the young leads was a roster of accomplished adult performers, Antonio Banderas and Carla Gugino as their spy parents, Cheech Marin as their protective, secretive Uncle Felix, Alan Cumming as the tortured and ultimately redeemable Floop, and Tony Shalhoub as Minion, each of whom had to calibrate performances that were broad and cartoonish enough to match the film's tone without undercutting the story's more sincere emotional beats about family loyalty and trust. Banderas and Gugino, in particular, needed to sell a jewel register across the shoot, playing Gregorio and Ingrid first as a seemingly ordinary suburban couple whose spy past remained hidden from their own children, and then, once that secret is revealed, as capable, resourceful field agents thrown back into action after a decade away from it. That shift required the two actors to modulate their physicality and line delivery across the shoot, depending on which side of the character's double life a given scene called for, moving between domestic warmth in the film's earlier home set scenes and more heightened action driven urgency once the story's central kidnapping plot is set into motion. Additional smaller roles including a cameo appearance by George Clooney as OSS Chief Devlin and an appearance by filmmaker Richard Linklater as a background cool spy, speak to the wider circle of collaborators and friends Rodriguez was able to draw on for the production, a byproduct of his deep ties to the Austin filmmaking community. Because Spy Kids was designed from the outset to avoid graphic violence and to keep its action grounded in slapstick and gadgetry rather than realistic peril, the choreography of its set pieces, the Tum Tum robot assaults on the Cortez family home, the submarine escape, the infiltration of Floop's castle, and the eventual confrontation with the army of miniature spy kid robots had to be staged with an eye towards spectacle that remained legible and exciting for young audiences without tipping into anything genuinely frightening or intense. That balancing act during filming, translating a screenplay built around childlike imagination into physically shot sequences involving stunts, practical robot props, and coordinated action, was central to realizing Rodriguez's stated goal of making a movie that felt like it had been directed by a kid's imagination while still functioning as a polished, coherent studio action adventure film. Shooting a family action film with this much physical spectacle inside a comparatively tight 48-day window required careful sequencing of setups so that the production could move efficiently between the story's many distinct environments. The Cortez family's suburban home, Uncle Felix's residence, Machete's hidden spy workshop, the safe house the children flee to, and the sprawling, brightly colored interiors and exteriors of Floop's castle. Each of these locations demanded its own distinct visual identity, and much of that differentiation had to be achieved through production design and practical construction rather than through extensive later digital enhancement, again placing pressure on the shoot itself to capture usable, fully realized environments in camera. Rodriguez's dual role as director and cinematographer's close collaborator, working alongside Guillermo Navarro, who served as the film's credited cinematographer, meant that decisions about blocking, lighting, and camera movement for the more elaborate set pieces could be made quickly and adjusted on the fly without extensive separate consultation, consistent with the same efficient, low overhead instincts that shaped every other stage of the production. The physical demands placed on the film's two child leads during this stretch of filming were considerable for actors of their age, given how much of the story's second half hinges on Carmen and Juni actively participating in escapes, infiltrations, and confrontations rather than simply reacting to adult characters around them. Sequences such as the children's submarine escape from their besieged home, their theft of Machete's spy jet, and their eventual infiltration of Floop's castle required close coordination between the young performers, stunt personnel, and the practical props and vehicle mock-ups built to support those sequences, all captured within the same efficient shooting schedule that governed the rest of the Austin-based production. Post-production consistent with the hands-on, do-it-yourself instincts that had defined his career since El Mariachi, Rodriguez took on editing duties for Spy Kids himself rather than handing that responsibility to an outside editor, a choice reflected in his official credit as the film's editor alongside his writing and directing credits. That level of direct control over the cutting of the film allowed Rodriguez to pacing, comic timing, and the rhythm of its action sequences according to his own instincts through post production rather than delegating those judgments to a separate collaborator working from his footage. This approach mirrored the way Rodriguez would go on to handle post production duties across the entire Spy Kids franchise, taking on cinematography, editing, and scoring responsibilities to varying degrees on the sequels that followed, a hallmark of the largely self contained production model he continued to refine at his Troublemaker Studios base in Texas. The post production period also involved integrating the film's practical effects work, including the prosthetic and puppet elements built for Floop's Tum Tum robots and the mutated version of Minion, into the finished cut alongside whatever digital augmentation the production required to sell the more fantastical elements of Floop's castle and the army of child sized androids central to the villain's plot. Because so much of the effects work had been achieved practically during filming rather than through extensive planned visual effects sequences, the post production process leaned more on integrating and polishing existing photograph material than on generating large amounts of computer generated imagery from scratch, in keeping with Rodriguez's preference for tangible on set solutions. Alongside the picture edit, post production incorporated the completion of the film's score and songs discussed at greater length below, which required coordinating contributions from multiple composers and outside musicians into a cohesive musical identity for the finished film. The overall post production period concluded in time for the film's early 2001 release date, with the completed cut previewed for industry audiences at the ShowWest Exhibitors Convention in Las Vegas that March, shortly before the film's theatrical rollout, giving distributors and theater owners an early look at the finished film ahead of its public premiere. In the months following the film's initial theatrical release, Rodriguez and his collaborators returned to the post production process once more to assemble an extended cut released theatrically as Spy Kids Special Edition, which restored at least one deleted scene not included in the original theatrical version. Although a commentary track and additional interview material were reportedly recorded around this time with the intention of eventually releasing the special edition on DVD, that home video release never came together as planned, leaving the expanded cut to exist for years primarily as a theatrical curiosity before eventually surfacing again in a later home media release. This second pass through post production is worth considering on its own terms, separate from the original theatrical cut's finishing work. Reassembling a finished, already released film in order to reinsert previously cut material required Rodriguez to revisit earlier editorial decisions and weigh how a restored scene would affect the pacing and rhythm of a story that audiences and critics had, by that point, already experienced and responded to in its original form. That the studio was willing to commission an entirely separate theatrical re release built around this reworked cut, rather than simply holding the additional material for a future home video special edition, reflects how much confidence Miramax and Dimension had in the property's continued box office viability even months after its original spring opening, and it foreshadowed the studio's broader eagerness to keep the film's momentum going through the rest of 2001 and into the franchise's next installment. Music, the musical identity of Spy Kids, was built from an unusually collaborative patchwork of composers and contributors, reflecting the scale of a studio production layered on top of Rodriguez's own instincts as a sometime composer in his own right. The film's score is credited primarily to John Debney and Danny Elfman, with additional contributions folded in from a range of other musicians, including Rodriguez himself and his brother Marcel Rodriguez, both of whom had smaller hands on roles in shaping specific musical cues throughout the picture. This collaborative approach to scoring, blending a well established Hollywood composer's voice in Elfman with Debney's own credentials and Rodriguez's personal involvement, gave the finished score a slightly eclectic quality suited to a film that itself blended earnest family drama with heightened spy movie spectacle. Elfman's most prominent and memorable contribution to the film is Floop's song Cruel World, a piece written specifically to be performed on screen within the story itself by Alan Cumming in character as Fig and Floop. Rodriguez approached Elfman to write this piece before principal photography even began, giving the production a finished piece of source music that could be built into Floop's on camera performance rather than layered in afterward as non diegetic scoring. Once Elfman's melody for the song existed, composer Chris Boardman came on board, specifically to adapt that musical theme so that it could recur and be woven through other portions of the broader score, giving Floop's signature tune a presence that extended beyond its single on screen performance and into the film's wider musical texture. For the remainder of the score's cues, Rodriguez worked with a group of composers connected to media ventures, the influential Los Angeles film scoring house associated with Hans Zimmer. Specifically, he collaborated with several of Zimmer's proteges, Harry Gregson Williams, Gavin Greenaway, and Heitor Pereira, who wrote much of the score's remaining cues, giving the underlying musical bed of the film a polished, contemporary blockbuster sounds consistent with other studio action films scored out of that same creative circle during the period. The combination of Elfman's more theatrical, character driven theme work with the Media Ventures team's broader orchestral scoring gave the film's soundtrack a layered quality anchored by a handful of distinct, hummable themes tied to specific characters and moments rather than a single uniform musical identity carried across the whole runtime. Beyond the original score, the film also folded in outside musical performances that reinforced its Latin inflected sensibility, an element closely tied to Rodriguez's own heritage and to the film's broader emphasis on centering a Latino family at the heart of a mainstream spy adventure story. The band Los Lobos recorded a cover version of Tito Puente's well known song Oye Como Va, reworked for the film under the adapted title Oye Como Spy, with new lyrics credited to musician David Garza working alongside Rodriguez himself. That track went on to earn a nomination for Outstanding Song in a Motion Picture Soundtrack at the 2002 Alma Awards, an honor recognizing outstanding achievement by Latino artists in entertainment, underscoring how the musical choices in Spy Kids reinforced the same cultural identity that ran through its casting and story. The film's closing theme, Spy Kids Save the World, was handled differently from the rest of the soundtrack, performed by the Los Angeles based indie pop group Fonda rather than drawn from the composers working on the underscore. Placed over the end credits, the song functioned as a more radio friendly, contemporary pop bookend to a score that elsewhere leaned toward orchestral spy movie pastiche, giving the film's soundtrack album a broader stylistic range spanning orchestral character themes, a Latin inflected cover song, and modern pop. The finished soundtrack album, released under the title Spy Kids, music from the Dimension Motion Picture, compiled selections from across this patchwork of contributors into a single, roughly half-hour collection. The album's tracklist moves through cues such as Cortez Family, credited to Greenaway, Pereira, and Gregson Williams. My Parents Are Spies, credited solely to Elfman. Spy Wedding, a joint composition between Los Lobos and Rodriguez. Spy Kids Demonstration, credited to Debney Rodriguez and Marcel Rodriguez, and further cues such as Parents on Mission, Kids Escape House, Pod Chase, The Safe House, The Third Brain, and Buddy Pack Escape, each tied to specific sequences or turning points within the story and credited to varying combinations of the score's several contributing composers. The album also includes Oye Como Spy, as performed by Los Lobos, Floop's song Cruel World, as performed by Cumming, additional cues including Spy Go Round, Minions Sneaking Around Machetes, The Spy Plane, Floop's Castle, and Final Family Theme, before closing with Fonda's Spy Kids Save the World. Taken together, the album stands as a document of just how many hands shaped the film's musical identity, a reflection of both the scale of the production and Rodriguez's practice of drawing on a wide circle of collaborators for a project he otherwise kept tightly under his own personal control in nearly every other department. The score's broader industry reception proved strong. It went on to win recognition at the ASCAP Film and Television Music Awards, specifically honored in the Top Box Office Films category, credited to John Debney, an award that recognizes composers whose scores were attached to some of the year's highest grossing releases, situating Spy Kids music within the same commercial tier as far larger studio tentpoles released that year. The sheer number of names attached to the score is itself worth dwelling on, since it illustrates how differently Rodriguez approached music compared to the other major craft departments on the film, where he served as writer, director, editor, and hands on effects collaborator across nearly every other stage of production. The score was assembled through delegation to specialists and frequent handoffs between contributors, with individual cues sometimes carrying joint credits split between two or three different composers working from the same thematic material. That structure allowed Rodriguez to draw on Elfman's established gift for playful, slightly off kilter character themes for flute sequences, the more traditional large scale orchestral action writing associated with the Media Ventures composers for the film's chase and confrontation sequences, and his own more personal, lower key musical contributions for smaller connective cues without needing any single composer to stretch across every tonal register the finished film required. The result was a score built less around one dominant musical voice than around a mosaic of contributions stitched together in service of the picture's shifting moods, from Floop's theatrical musical numbers to the sweeping, sincere family reunion material that closes out the story. The inclusion of Oi Como Spy also deserves attention as a piece of cultural signaling layered into the film's soundtrack rather than simply a licensed cover chosen for its familiarity. Tito Puente's original Oye Como Va is one of the most widely recognized compositions in Latin music, previously popularized for mainstream American audiences through Santana's own famous cover decades earlier. By commissioning a new version specifically for Spy Kids, credited jointly to David Garza and Rodriguez himself, the production found a way to fold an unmistakably Latin musical touchstone directly into a mainstream studio family film soundtrack, reinforcing at the level of music the same emphasis on Latino identity and representation that ran through the film's casting and thematic content more broadly. Release Theatrical Spy Kids received its first public unveiling well ahead of its wide theatrical opening, premiering at Disney California Adventure in Anaheim, California on March 18, 2001. Staging the premiere at a theme park rather than a traditional Hollywood venue reflected the film's identity as a family oriented event picture, aligning its launch with a destination already associated with family entertainment rather than with the more typical red carpet premiere circuit used for adult oriented studio releases. Ahead of that public premiere, the finished film had also been shown to industry professionals earlier that same March at Show West, the exhibitors convention held in Las Vegas, where theater owners and distributors previewed upcoming releases, giving the film an early foothold of industry buzz and word of mouth in the weeks leading into its commercial rollout. The film then opened wide across the United States on March 30, 2001, distributed by Dimension Films, the genre oriented label operating under the Miramax umbrella that had also released several of Rodriguez's earlier, more adult skewing projects. Distributing a family film through Dimension, a label better known at the time for horror and genre fare, marked something of a departure for both Rodriguez and the studio, signaling Miramax's broader confidence that the finished picture could cross over successfully into the family and children's market despite the label's usual associations. Marketing and promotional tie ins played a substantial role in the film's theatrical rollout. Spy Kids became the first film promoted as part of a newly signed multi year partnership between Miramax Films and the popcorn brand Pop Secret, an agreement formalized in June 2001 following the commercial success of both Spy Kids and Miramax's other early 2001 hit, Bridget Jones's Diary. Under the terms of that arrangement, which was structured to run annually across 5 films, Pop Secret products would be featured at theatrical screenings and work into home video tie in promotions for the covered releases. For Spy Kids specifically, that meant Pop Secret Popcorn was present in theaters again for the film's August re release, while its eventual home video release carried specially branded Pop Secret special editions bundled with collectible items and sweepstakes style prize entries. Retailer Target additionally offered shoppers who purchased copies of the film free Pop Secret popcorn as a further incentive tied to the promotional partnership. The film's marketing also extended into fast food tie-in territory through a partnership with McDonald's, one that would recur across the first three entries in the Spy Kids series. Laurie Sale, who served as an executive vice president of promotion at Miramax Films during this period, later singled out the McDonald's tie-ins built around the first three Spy Kids films as among the strongest promotional partnerships the studio had put together, a testament to how effectively the franchise's toy-friendly, gadget-filled aesthetic translated into fast food premium merchandise aimed at exactly the demographic the films were designed to reach. Commercially, the theatrical run opened strongly. Spy Kids debuted across 3,104 venues in North America, earning approximately $26.5 million dollars during its opening weekend and claiming the top spot at the domestic box office. That opening was strong enough to hold the number one position for three consecutive weekends, a run that ended only when Bridget Jones's Diary, also distributed by Miramax Films, posted stronger second weekend earnings and displaced it from the top of the chart. That the film, distributed by the same studio, ultimately unseated it from the top spot underscored just how competitive and successful Miramax's early 2001 release slate proved to be overall, with two of the studio's own films effectively trading places atop the box office chart in successive weeks. Beyond its initial wide release, Spy Kids received a second theatrical push several months later when an extended cut titled Spy Kids Special Edition, restoring at least one scene absent from the original theatrical version, opened in United States theaters on August 8, 2001. This re release allowed the studio to extend the film's theatrical life and capture additional audience interest heading into the later summer moviegoing season, months after the initial spring release had already run its course. Reports at the time also indicated that the film or promotional materials tied to it were made available inside specially marked Kellogg's product packaging distributed for a limited time in Canada. One of several such serial box tie ins bundling promotional access to a handful of different films together as part of a broader cross promotional marketing push aimed at younger consumers and their families. Taken together, the film's theatrical release strategy reflects a studio treating Spy Kids less as a single, self contained box office event and more as the opening chapter of an ongoing promotional and commercial relationship with its audience. The staggered rollout, a theme park premiere, an exhibitor preview, a wide spring opening, a summer re release built around new footage, and a web of simultaneous food, retail, and packaging tie ins spanning two countries gave Miramax and Emission multiple distinct opportunities to keep the property in front of family audiences across nearly half a calendar year, well beyond the traditional single weekend marketing push associated with most studio releases of the period. That extended because it helped me improve multi-pronged approach to keeping the film in theaters and in the public conversation throughout much of 2001 mirrors the same instinct that would soon drive the franchise's rapid sequel production schedule, a recognition on the studio's part that the underlying property had an unusually durable appeal capable of sustaining engagement well past a single opening weekend. Home Media Spy Kids' path onto home video was more layered than a single straightforward release, reflecting both the film's ongoing commercial life as the flagship entry in a growing franchise and some of the logistical complications that arose around its planned special edition content. The film's initial home entertainment release arrived on VHS and DVD on September 18, 2001, distributed by Buena Vista Home Entertainment, bringing the theatrical cut of the film into households well before the end of its debut year, despite the earlier theatrical release of the extended special edition cut that August. Plans to bring that particular version of the film to DVD, complete with a recorded director's commentary track and additional interview material that had reportedly already been completed, ultimately did not come to fruition. That expanded home video release never materialized during the period when it was originally planned, leaving general audiences without direct home access to the deleted scene and supplementary content associated with the theatrical special edition cut for a full decade after the film's original release. That gap was eventually addressed, at least partially, a full 10 years later. The special edition cut of the film became available as part of the movie's Blu ray re release on August 2, 2011, a release timed deliberately to coincide both with the 10th anniversary of the original film's debut and with the theatrical release of the franchise's fourth installment, Spy Kids, All the Time in the World, that same month. However, that 2011 Blu ray release did not restore everything originally associated with the planned special edition package. The director's commentary track and the remainder of the deleted scenes recorded back around the time of the 2001 theatrical special edition were not included alongside the added scene that did make it onto the disc. The broader pattern of Spy Kids' home media releases over the following decade reflected the film's ongoing repackaging as part of a larger franchise collection rather than as a standalone title. In addition to the individual 2111 Blu ray release, the first three films in the series were bundled together and issued as a triple feature set on DVD and Blu ray disc later that same year, distributed by Lionsgate, even though the underlying DVD transfers used in some of those bundled releases reportedly remained the original Buena Vista Home Entertainment masters from years earlier rather than newly remastered editions. Years later, in 2020, the same first three entries in the franchise were reissued together once more as a triple feature set on DVD and Blu ray, this time distributed by Paramount, reflecting a shift in which company held home entertainment distribution rights to the franchise's catalog over time as ownership of the Dimension Films library changed hands across the ensuing years. The film's home media footprint was not confined strictly to disc releases either. Alongside the theatrical and video release, the story was also adapted into a novelization published in March 2001 by Talk Miramax Books, written by children's book author Megan Stein, giving young readers who wanted to revisit the story or who encountered the marketing before seeing the film itself a print version of the narrative to accompany the theatrical release. That tie in extended even into the film's own promotional materials. The theatrical posters and closing credits for the movie carried the line Read the Talk Myra Marx books, directly prompting audiences toward the print retelling as a complementary piece of the film's broader release strategy, reinforcing just how tightly the studio wove together its theatrical print and eventual home video release plans around the property from the very beginning. The gap between the film's 2001 theatrical special edition and its eventual partial home video restoration a full decade later also illustrates a broader pattern common to many early 2000s studio releases, where supplementary content recorded during a film's original promotional window sometimes went unused for years, or in some cases indefinitely, as home entertainment release plans shifted, budgets for supplemental content were reallocated, or corporate ownership of a given title's distribution rights changed hands before a planned special edition could be finalized. That the commentary track and remaining deleted scenes recorded around 2001 still had not surfaced even by the time of the 10th anniversary Blu ray release suggests that whatever institutional knowledge or physical materials existed around that original special edition plan may have become difficult to locate or reassemble a decade on. A common hazard for supplementary film content that is recorded well before a studio has settled on a final release strategy for it, viewed across its full span from the September 2001 VHS and DVD debut through the eventual 2020 Paramount distributed reissue. The home media history of Spy Kids traces the same broader shifts affecting the wider Dimension Films catalog as ownership of that library passed between different corporate parents over nearly 2 decades. What began as a Buena Vista Home Entertainment release tied to Miramax's ownership structure at the time of the film's original release eventually migrated to Lionsgate for the 10-year anniversary Blu ray packages before shifting again to Paramount for the 2020 reissue, each transition reflecting corporate and distribution changes well outside of Rodriguez's own creative control, that the film continued to be actively repackaged and resold in new bundled formats across each of these ownership transitions rather than quietly falling out of print, speaks to its continued commercial viability as a recognizable family title decades after its theatrical debut, and to the ongoing value distributors placed in keeping the original trilogy of films available together as a unit for new generations of home viewers discovering the franchise for the first time. Reception box office by Kids proved to be a substantial commercial success relative to its production budget, delivering the kind of result that helped convince its studio to greenlight a rapid succession of sequels over the following decade. Produced on a budget of roughly $35 million, a moderate figure by studio tentpole standards, even at the time, the film's opening weekend alone recouped a meaningful share of that investment with its $26.5 million debut across more than 3,000 North American venues, representing a strong opening multiple relative to its overall cost. The film's staying power at the box office was just as notable as its opening, rather than posting a large debut and then falling away quickly, as is common for many family films competing against ongoing franchise releases and other studio products. Spy Kids held on to the number one position at the North American box office for 3 consecutive weekends. That sustained run reflected strong word of mouth and repeat family viewership building on top of the film's initial opening, a pattern often associated with successful family titles that appeal to multiple generations within the same household and therefore continue drawing new theatrical visits well beyond a single opening weekend built primarily around promotional buzz. The film's number one streak only came to an end when Miramax's own Bridget Jones's Diary posted a stronger second weekend and overtook it at the top of the chart, a competitive dynamic made slightly unusual by the fact that both films were being distributed by the same studio during the same stretch of the 2001 release calendar. By the time its theatrical run had played out, including the additional theatrical exposure generated by the August 2001 special edition re release, Spy Kids had accumulated $112.7 million in box office receipts across the United States and Canada. International markets added a further $35.2 million to that total, bringing the film's worldwide theatrical gross to approximately $147.9 million against its $35 million production budget. That result represented a return of well over 4 times the film's production cost purely from theatrical box office receipts, a ratio that, combined with the ancillary revenue generated through the film's various merchandising, home video, and licensing tie ins, made the project a clear financial success for both Rodriguez's Troublemaker Studios and its distributor. That commercial performance carried consequences well beyond the fate of this single film. The strength of Spy Kids' box office return was central to the decision to rapidly expand the property into a full franchise with a sequel, Spy Kids 2, The Island of Lost Dreams, following little more than a year later in the summer of 2002, itself followed by a third entry, Spy Kids 3D, Game Over in 2003. The consistency of that release cadence, with new installments arriving in successive years immediately following the original success, reflects how confidently the studio moved to capitalize on the underlying property once the first film's financial performance had demonstrated a durable family audience for the Cortez family's adventures. Even later, more commercially uneven installments in the series, including a fourth film released nearly a decade after the original and a fifth entry produced as a streaming era relaunch decades later, trace their existence back to the financial foundation established by this first film's box office performance in the spring of 2001, placed within the broader context of the spring 2001 box office calendar. Spice Kids' performance stands out for how effectively it carved out family audience turf without direct competition from another similarly positioned major studio release during the same weeks. Its 3 week run atop the domestic chart occurred during a stretch of the calendar not typically dominated by major family franchise tentpoles, allowing the film room to build sustained audience interest without needing to immediately share screens and audience attention with a comparably budgeted competitor aimed at the same demographic. The film's eventual on $47. 9 million worldwide total also positioned it as a clear outperformer relative to its $35 million budget when set against many of the other family and youth oriented releases from the same year, reinforcing to Miramax and Dimension executives that family audience spy adventure material executed with enough visual imagination and technical polish could produce returns rivaling much larger studio productions built around more conventional or more expensive production approaches. The film's financial results also had a direct bearing on how the studio approached budgeting for its immediate sequels. Spy Kids 2 arrived with a modestly larger budget of roughly $38 million, and Spy Kids 3D Game Over pushed that figure further still, reflecting growing confidence rooted directly in the original film's box office return that increased per film investment in FX, 3D presentation technology, and production scale would continue to be matched by comparable or greater box office reward. That escalating investment across the franchise's early sequels, each building on the commercial proof of concept established by the original film's opening weekend and holdover performance in 2001, illustrates just how directly the reception of this first installment shaped the studio's subsequent strategy for the franchise as a whole. Critical response by Kids open to a broadly positive critical reception, a result that set apart from a good deal of contemporaneous family oriented studio product, much of which tended to receive more mixed or dismissive treatment from mainstream film critics during the same period. On the aggregator site Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 92% based on 132 collected reviews, with an average rating of 7.3 out of 10, figures that place it comfortably among the more critically well regarded family films of its era. The site's compiled critical consensus describes the film as a kinetic, fun feature likely to entertain children of all ages, a characterization that captures the dominant tenor of contemporary reviews. Appreciation for the film's energy and imaginative spectacle paired with acknowledgement of its appeal specifically to a family audience. On Metacritic, which aggregates and weights individual critic scores rather than simply tallying positive versus negative verdicts, Spy Kids earned a score of 71 out of 100 based on 27 critics, a result the site's own scale characterizes as indicating generally favorable reviews. Audience reaction, measured through CinemaScore polling of opening weekend moviegoers, was even more emphatically positive, with polled audiences awarding the film an average grade of A on the service's A plus to F scale, indicating strong satisfaction among the people who actually turned out to see it in its opening days.